Good morning, everybody. JB Van Hollen is my very special guest today, Monday, November 2nd, 2020. I'm Ben Dryden, and you're watching DrydenWire Live. My guest today, it's loud on my end, former Wisconsin Attorney General, current co-chair of VoteSafe Wisconsin, a bipartisan coalition that is reaching out to voters across the state to ensure they have the information to vote safely during COVID-19. Oh, and also, he was recently announced as having the coolest name on the planet by DrydenWire.com. JB Van Hollen, good morning, sir.
Coolest name on the planet. That's tough to beat.
Yeah, it really is. You should really have an expressway named after you.
Yeah.
You know,
work on it. You're the man with the connections now. You work on it.
All right. Okay. It could. You know what we'll do? We'll get all of the candidates, or not candidates, the people that are in office right now, like, let's see, Romaine Quinn isn't seeking re-election. The 10th Senate District is, one of those two is going to be out of a job, either Representative Staff Schultz or Senator Schachner. I'll find all the ones that have a lame duck period here, and we'll see if we can get that done before they go. Get a bill. Because JB Van Hollen...
It'll probably be a muddy back road.
Yeah. Well, it just sounds like it should be, you know, like the Kennedy Expressway or the Eisenhower. And when you're a former attorney general, there's only like 45 of those ever, so it's a pretty exclusive club. I mean, and not just because you're a former attorney general doesn't mean you get one, because no one's going to say, you know, get on the Brad Schimmel Parkway. It just doesn't have a nice ring to it. But the JB Van Hollen, I'm telling you, we'll make it happen.
All right. I plan on it.
Yeah, I see. So the last time that you were on, see, look, I got all nice and clean for you. I shaved last night. I even showered. That's the second time in 7 days I showered just for you, buddy. And now I look like you got the COVID beard or something going on.
Well, I shaved last night too. I just, when you grow up, you'll grow this fast too.
Yeah. Men have nice big beards, and I want to be one someday, so I need practice. So what have you been up to lately? You were last on here July, I don't know, somewhere in July. It was right before the primary, I believe. What have you been up to since then?
Yeah, well, amongst the other things that I do for a living, working with VoteSafe has been very active, doing a lot of earned media. We started doing some paid media. Just recorded another commercial yesterday that is scheduled to run after the election to encourage people to be patient and have faith in the electoral system, because I don't think that we're going to have results on election night like we customarily do. Yeah. So it's a lot about still educating the voters, and there's an awful lot of groups doing it, not just ours. And collectively, I think we've had quite a bit of success. I mean, we've had probably almost as many absentee or early votes during this election cycle than I received in votes in their entirety during my first election. It's pretty amazing.
Sorry, I'm hearing a whole bunch of noise in here. Someone's out in the hall. So I caught most of that. I think everyone that was listening heard you. So they can fill me in later what you said. I did look up just last night, just Googled your name. And I saw you did a couple of chats about VoteSafe Wisconsin. We'll get to that in a second, a little bit more detail. But I saw one, it was on, I think it was like Yahoo News or Yahoo something. And I wrote this down because it was like a 2-minute video. So I'm thinking, oh, this must be like the highlight of the chat. Yeah, it wasn't. It was on October 2nd, and it was with a Charles Benson and Carol Meekins. I'm not sure who those people are, but there's two, co-hosts. And the guy had asked you, give us a brief description of what VoteSafe Wisconsin is. And he was emphasized brief, right? So then you talked for like a minute, and then they had one question, and then you answer that, and then it was, JB Van Hollen, we appreciate you making time for us. I'm like, what? That's it? So when you go through things, I don't know, everyone's different. I get that they have so much time they have to fill, and maybe they don't have enough time for some. But when you do a lot of these conversations, do you find it frustrating when it's, wow, you asked me one question, and that's it? Like, do you find that frustrating?
Historically, I did when I was in office and had an awful lot that we needed to say about a certain subject matter, because a soundbite doesn't do the trick. It's hard to explain many things in a soundbite. With VoteSafe, we came into it with a simple message because we're savvy enough with the press to know that we're not always going to get DrydenWire type experiences, and we're going to get chances to say one or two things. So we tried to keep our message simple, and it got even simpler. I mean, our message was that you should try to vote early, get your absentee ballots requested and returned early to make sure that they get counted, and it's a secure way to vote. And if you want to vote in person, by all means, it's very safe. The clerks have implemented all sorts of safety procedures to be able to do that. Well, now our message is half that, because obviously it's a little difficult to vote and put your ballot in the mail now and have it received tomorrow at your clerk's office. You could still potentially vote early in some ways, but for the most part, you need to vote in person now. So our message is, don't be scared to vote. A lot of precautions in place.
Sure. Is that when you're asked that question? All right, give me a brief. What is VoteSafe Wisconsin? I'm sure it's like a Trump speech or something, right? This is what I say. I've said it 1,000 times. Is that what that was? And if not, what is here's my pitch of what this all is.
Yeah, that's basically the pitch. In Wisconsin, we have a long-standing methods of voting. They're not new for COVID. They've been in place for a long time. It's not a fly-by-night, suddenly vote-by-mail system. You got to show a photo ID to vote by mail. You got to have a witness signature and address, put your own address. Very secure. There's room for fraud and everything, but not a lot of room for fraud in Wisconsin's mail voting or absentee voting procedure. And we have wonderful clerks in this state who are, going crazy to get volunteers to make sure that there's not long waits. Yet we still have very, very safe voting facilities. It's pure and simple. We want people to vote, and we want to make sure they vote the way that they're most comfortable doing so, and we want to educate them that they can.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because the second interview that I had seen, it was actually a longer interview. It was on, I think, WPR, so it was just an audio thing, and you were actually asked about voter fraud, and I don't remember. I didn't write it down, so I'm just trying to remember. I think it was something that it was the 2016 or 2018 election. There was like 19 examples or something. Which, first of all, that's like a stupid low number, at least to me. That's wow, 19. And again, I don't remember for how long or what period that was for. Do you think that people realize that it's such a low number? Or do you think that's just something that, well, people keep bringing up, but they're just not really educated on it?
Well, I think numbers on voting fraud are very inaccurate, and it's a reason why people don't necessarily understand how much there necessarily is out there. The reality is, if somebody votes without a photo ID, which is what we had not too many years ago, and they vote as if they're somebody else, it's very difficult to come back later and be able to prove that that occurred. So you may come back and see that somebody registered and voted at a certain address and said they were a certain person, provided a piece of mail to show that they were registered at that address. You go out and look later and realize that address doesn't even exist. Well, at that juncture, there was voter fraud, but you can't bring a charge against anybody because you have no idea who it is who voted as that fraudulent person or at the fraudulent location. So that doesn't get added to the numbers.
Sure. Yeah, I just didn't realize actually that it was so low, to be honest. I don't know. I hear about that stuff, and I'm like,
it's a lot lower now. We have photo ID in place. It's difficult to present yourself as somebody else. Obviously, there's fake IDs out there and things along those lines. You're never going to have a system where you're encouraging people to vote, where you're going to have complete security and guaranteed that there's going to be no fraud. Where people are going to try hard enough, they're going to be able to fraudulently vote or, vote for people who don't exist. But I think in Wisconsin, we've done a great job of implementing all the procedures we really can to protect against that, while still ensuring that people who are entitled to vote get to without, stumbling blocks that they can't get over.
Well, I think I saw this morning there was 1.8. I think it was 1.8 million. I think I have it written down somewhere.
Early votes.
Yeah, early votes, and I don't remember when that was from. It was from yesterday's story. So 1.8 million. Holy buckets! So at this point, I think even on that WPR anyway, I was just kind of skipping through some of it. You had mentioned that there is or that the polling places are safe, and you're trying to encourage people and letting people know that they are safe. But I think you had mentioned that maybe they weren't always safe at one point, but they are now. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, we had at one point, obviously, when COVID first started, people were scared to open polling places at all. In some places, not as many polling places open because they didn't know how they could protect people from the spread of COVID. And I think we had some locations that were open and just business as usual.
Sure.
And I think most people would agree that in large gatherings in some of these circumstances, people touching the same pen over and over again, that you can have problems. But now, they have plexiglass and glass up. They've got spacing. They disinfect between voters. I voted live in person in the last 3 elections since COVID, and you get to take the pen with you. Yeah, you actually get something from the government.
Nice. All right.
And so I think that, there was a juncture where, it could have been a little bit or a lot riskier to vote in person. That doesn't really exist now. And to add to that, and I think a twist that a lot of people aren't looking at, well, 1.8 million early votes, that's roughly a third of the population of the state of Wisconsin. Well, when you've got, 2/3 or fewer of the people likely vote, half the people who are going to go to a polling place have already polled. So you're going to have fewer crowds just because of that as well.
We have a question, and I don't know if there's something you want to get into, but we always like to, ask any questions from people that have one. Oh, man, this is in blue. Oh, I screwed that up. I was playing around with this yesterday. Well, that's hard to read. How are we going to address voter fraud across USA? So looking at it more from a macro standpoint, is there a way to address that?
Sometimes there is, sometimes there not. Like I said, some of that voter fraud is difficult to even discuss or to discover. I mean, not to mention do anything about. When I was AG, we were aware of certain occasions of voter fraud, but there was no way to investigate it further or determine who was committing it, and so it kind of ended there. Now it's a little easier. Now, states have done an awful lot more to implement procedures where that I can identify people who have done things wrong and do a little tracking. Mm-hmm. And I think we've seen examples of that in recent elections, and that really is going to be up to local officials. Attorneys general in the various states are largely responsible for spearheading whether voter fraud exists and how they can investigate it. And I think all AGs of both political parties take it seriously. It's a law enforcement issue. If there's voter fraud, they don't know which side it's coming from, which party it's coming from. They want a legitimate vote. So I think to the degree that there's evidence that can be followed up on, there's law enforcement there who wants to follow up on it. For instance, a lot of the leads in Wisconsin that we would get would come from the State Elections Commission, which is bipartisan. And so they're going to be the ones who are going to really forward those leads and without politics really in mind.
Well, obviously right now with our political climate that we're in, it being what it is, this is a VoteSafe Wisconsin is a nonpartisan coalition, a nonpartisan organization. Everything about it's nonpartisan. Some of the things that I've heard some people ask you, it seems as though they're almost like a baiting question regarding politics. Have you found that kind of challenging to, okay, we're not talking about this part or this part? Because everything right now is political, right? It just is. Everyone wants to talk about that. So have you found there, kind of that challenge when you're asked questions to, okay, I don't want to get into that part, or I got to be careful how I say this because I don't want to. Do you run into those?
I run into those, but I find that probably due to our advanced team doing a great job, a lot of people, I think, are notified that those aren't going to be answered. I'm not in office right now, so I don't think the media is as inspired to get me with gotcha questions as they perhaps have been in the past. And if they do, and it has come up, I just say, this is something that all people should be refreshed about, is that we have a bipartisan or nonpartisan group doing something in the country nowadays. And we're going to do our best to honor that by not answering policy opinion questions. And I'll just take it head on because I think it's almost part of our message is to be able to take that head on and say, no, we don't answer those questions.
Well, I've got some, I have some hard-hitting questions for you. Are you ready? I literally wrote these down. Like, this is the most, prepared I've ever been for a show because I actually wrote down some questions. So last time you were here, you were on back in July, you said that as a former statesman, if I recall, you were strongly against COVID-19. Has your position changed?
These are tough questions.
Yeah, I know. I told you. So you're not answering that, huh? Okay, all right.
Yeah, yeah. Put me down as not willing to answer that question.
No comment. Got it. All right, fine. Uh, let's see. The last time you were on, you talked about being a huge supporter of law enforcement. Is that still true today, given all the news and the stuff going on regarding law enforcement?
Yeah, truer than ever. Regardless, the bottom line is many of us have very difficult jobs, and I can't think of a single person who hasn't screwed up in life. Not to mention a single person who hasn't screwed up in their occupation, likely numerous times. Law enforcement, probably more than any other occupation out there, are required to act in seconds. And to make decisions based upon their training and common sense. You would expect their error rate would be through the roof compared to others, but it's not. It's like watching sports and watching the calls that refs and umps make, and you look at instant replay and you think, man,
Right.
how could they possibly get it right when it's that razor thin? Occasionally it's razor thin and they get it wrong. I kind of look at law enforcement that way. They do a pretty amazing job of getting it right almost all the time, despite the razor thin margin of error. And to be able to attack the few people who have potentially done something catastrophic based upon an error of judgment, I think is an inappropriate thing to do. Sure. Obviously, there are examples out there where a cop goes rogue. That happens, but don't paint law enforcement with that title. They go out there and put their lives on the line every day. You do a traffic stop, it's perhaps one of the most dangerous things they do. And they keep doing it. I question why sometimes, because they're not the most highly paid public servants out there. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So no, I have great respect and great support for them, and that will always be.
Here's another hard hitter. It's like a gotcha question here. When I looked for a picture to use last night for our just an announcement that you're going to be on the show this morning, I just put your name in and I just Googled some images. And all the pictures I found looked like they were taken like 15 years ago. And maybe 15 pounds ago. Are you purposely misleading and misrepresenting yourself to the public by doing this? And if so, why?
No, I'm being as honest with the public as I can by showing how old I've become.
Okay.
As if the gray hair wasn't enough, I decided to add a gray beard, because gray beards, of course, is almost synonymous with being old. No, it's amazing how time flies. I look at some of my first campaign pictures as well, and admittedly, when I've held most of the different positions I've held in life, I've done so as the youngest or close to youngest to do this or that. So you're going to find that most of my pictures, when I'm in elected or appointed office, I was quite young. I was blessed to get opportunities early, and it's been a fun career.
Yeah, you're like Rob Lowe. You just don't really age, and if you do, it's what? Really, you're how old? That's just nuts. So no, thanks. I want to have actually a beard that's gray. I think that's so cool looking, but I can't. I can barely even grow one anyway. So what are you gonna do? Someday when I'm a man.
Yeah.
So you have obviously been a part of a lot of elections. Like you actually being a part of the elections. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Have you ever seen an election like this one?
I haven't. You hear it all the time. It's the most important election of our lifetimes. And the most current one always seems to be, and there's good reason for it. I have not seen in the past, some parties, some sides had more money than others. And there's always been negative campaigning, but I don't know that it was necessarily to the level that it is now. When you watch the last presidential debate, and as long as I could stomach watching it, all that they were doing was attacking the others being corrupt. Not much issue discussion. There's a lot of hyperbole. There's a lot of accusations. There's a lot of stuff that really doesn't have to do with doing the job that's going on in politics there today. I find it's more like a real world type experience than it is campaigns that I'm accustomed to in the past. So I find this one is very different, and of course it's important. We have two very different candidates with two very different agendas.
Mm. And obviously with COVID and with absentee ballots, it's it's got to be impossible for anyone to really predict what's going to happen, what the outcome is, right? I mean, it's where do you? I don't know. I don't even know how they're coming up with some of these. And first of all, like these polls, I know they use like 800 or 1,000 likely voters, but man, that's just not enough, right? It just
Well,
can't be.
I think polling has changed over the years. I can tell you they've historically not, recent history, not been very accurate in Wisconsin. Of course, exit polling, leading up to my first election, I never led in a single poll, including the exit polls, and Fox News actually declared my opponent the winner. That's how much faith I have in polls.
Nice.
But the fact is that these polls have very large margins of error. It's not like in the past where everybody had a landline and you could reach them. They're using cell phones now, which makes it different. I think people are, perhaps Trump voters especially, are less likely to come forward in polls. I think there are a lot of Trump voters and supporters who historically haven't been politically active, and they basically, don't answer that kind of stuff. They're not accustomed to it, and so they don't give answers. So I think the polls, I'm certainly skeptical about them. If you had Donald Trump wouldn't be president today if the president were elected by polls, because he wasn't leading in them either. It was a shocker on election night. I think the results will be closer than the polls tend to indicate.
I think so too. And it's, again, going back to it's not just the number, the 800 or 1,000 people that they would poll. It's where they're from, right? So, like I've done in the past, excuse me, a poll on our DrydenWire group Facebook page, on our regular DrydenWire Facebook page, and then I will do a poll that I'll put on our website that you can take the poll right in the article, and we don't post that on Facebook anywhere. And there's a huge difference between all three of them. Actually, just for fun, I put one up last night, our final presidential poll, like who do you think is going to win, just on our group page. And I think it was, when I last checked, it was like 400 said Trump and 100 for Biden. And again, this is for who do you think is going to win. Now, that's a big, I mean, that's a wide margin there of 500 people. But in the past, it's a little bit closer when it comes to our regular page. And then on our website, it's usually more, believe it or not, it's either even or they have Biden winning. It's just so random, just based on the platform. So I don't know how any of these polls can be accurate. I mean, they just can't.
And they say plus or minus, I think historically the discussion was plus or minus 3 points is an accurate poll. Nowadays, you get a lot of plus or minus 4s, plus or minus 5s. I was just looking this morning at, I think, like 4 different polls that recently came out, or yesterday came out in Wisconsin on the presidential election. One has it, Biden leading by 1, and one was, Biden leading by 15. Well, guess what? One of them is horrifically wrong. Maybe both of them.
Yeah. Boy, those polls. I mean, I know there's businesses or organizations that run these polls, right? And they make a ton of money. I don't know. At some point, they're just going to have to rethink their model, because I don't think anyone's going to pay them anymore.
Part of the problem with polling is these people, they get paid by candidates to do it, and I mean, it helps to have what you think is information that can be helpful, but. The problem with it is with voters. We strongly encourage people to ignore the polls, because you don't want a Trump supporter to go, you know what, I'm not going to vote because he's down by 15 points in Wisconsin, so my vote's not going to make a difference. Or a Biden supporter saying, I'm not going to vote. My guy's up by 15 points. Why should I waste the half an hour to drive to the polling place and back? Well, the reason you should do it is because the polling may only be accurate because they're taking into account the people who haven't voted yet and where they're leaning. But secondly, because the polling may not be accurate, period. And it may be a 1-point margin, and your vote can make all the difference in the world.
That's interesting. I never thought about that. So those polls could actually have an effect on, wow, that's crazy to think about.
Yep.
And plus, if you're up by 15, let's say you're running, you decide, okay, that's it. I'm coming out of retirement. I'm going to run for the Ashland County District Attorney's Office. What's that?
Been there, done that.
Yeah, exactly. So you decide, I'm going to do that. And let's say somehow there's some internal polling numbers in Ashland, and you're up by 15. So what? I mean, how does that change anything you do? right? It's okay.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, maybe it changes something some people do, but in my campaigns, it was always a sprint to the finish.
Yeah.
You don't take anything for granted. Don't trust the polling. You've got one opportunity to do this. Do all you can between the time you start till the time polls are closed. And I think you're going to see, obviously, all the candidates are sprinting to the finish just for that reason.
VoteSafe Wisconsin. What you said you had some stuff going on after the election, but when is it wind down for you? Is this what's the future for VoteSafe Wisconsin? What is it? Are you still a part of this in January? Are you going to be going around and talking to people or giving this kind of information in 2 months from now, or is it was really kind of just for now, or every election cycle we're kind of just going to kind of keep doing this?
Well, for now, it was just for this election cycle. The idea is we're encouraging people to vote. So once the polls are closed, there's really no more task for us to accomplish. After the TV ads and radio ads for after the election weren't through VoteSafe. They're through another organization that's bipartisan that is doing this on a national scale, having attorneys general, current and past attorneys general, current and past governors get together and do these bipartisan TV commercials for after the election across the country. So that's a little different take on things than what our goal is with VoteSafe.
So what is your role as of Wednesday?
With VoteSafe, we're done. As far as I know, unless they come forward with something else. Keep in mind, VoteSafe's not I'm not an employee of VoteSafe. I'm a consultant, and they're one of my clients. So we move on. We focus on other things.
All right. And what are so after this is finished, your role in this capacity of VoteSafe on Wednesday? What are you going to do? So not with VoteSafe, but what now? What?
Yeah, well, like I said, I still have a group of clients who I represent in a number of different ways. I'll continue to do my work for them, and I continue to enjoy the great outdoors in northern Wisconsin. I moved back here a little over a year ago because I love the fall and I love the great outdoors and I love to hunt. And you're going to be finding me out there doing that stuff when I have free time.
Hunting, gross. It's the what do they call it?
You sound like a valley girl, and you're probably too young to know what that is.
Can I just say something right now? That's gross. The thing where you, what's it called when you gut them?
Yeah.
What's that? There's a word for that or a phrase for that, right?
I call it gutting.
Maybe that's it. I thought it was like field something or I don't know.
Field dress.
There you go. Yeah. So, which is just a fancy way of cut. That part is no way. I could never do that. That is just. Yeah.
You're not going to go to medical school?
No. I was gonna, but I decided I'll run a free media outlet instead. My wife didn't like that option, but hey. All right, man. Anything else you want to talk about before we let you go, or anything you want to say?
Appreciate being on. Appreciate having the casual conversation. It's kind of nice to be able to talk at length and talk about a little broader range. And someday down the road, maybe we'll do it again when I'm in a different capacity.
Yeah, when you're swinging through Spooner, let me know. You can stop into what Tom Tiffany calls what does he call this? Our world headquarters in Spooner, Wisconsin.
Well, I've spent a lot of time in Spooner. I lived in Spooner. Yeah. I lived in Trigo. I lived in Sorona.
Nobody lives in Sorona. It's got like 3 bars and a cemetery.
It was a mailing address of Sorona. I lived on Long Lake.
Oh, okay. See, that's different. All right, brother. Thanks so much for coming on.
You bet. Take care.
All right. Special thank you to my guest today, J.B. Van Hollen, and thank all of you for watching. I'll see all of you right back here tomorrow morning for another episode of Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy. Until then, stay safe, keep your social distance, and have a blessed day.